Hello, welcome back to another episode of interior design advice for my subscribers. Today we're doing a deep dive and we're only talking about one home, and that is this lovely split level North American home. It was built in 1956, and my subscriber that sent me this lives here with her family of 4. You can see I've blurred out her husband that was in the photos to protect his privacy. And the reason she sent this to me is because they're really struggling with this open concept living space on the main level of their house, which, as you can imagine, gets a lot of use. She wrote that they're struggling with defining zones within the open concept, which I really get. It can be so tricky to get an open concept to a place where it feels like balanced and it makes sense and each space is properly defined. What she's feeling most stumped on is the living room. She wrote to me that when they host friends, they like to hang out here, so they want it to feel cozy and good for socializing. They also use it to watch TV, and she wrote that they don't feel like they could mount the TV anywhere else than where it currently is. And she made sure to mention that sometimes they like to lay down when they watch TV, so they'd like to keep that as an option. They also love the view out of this front picture window, and she wrote that they get really nice natural light from these back windows that face the backyard. They've already made some changes to their home that they feel good about, including swapping out some light fixtures as well as painting. For now, they've just sort of thrown in a few sofas and other random furniture in here, along with this antique green leather chair that came from her husband's family and they're planning to keep. But other than that, they want to redesign the space. They're hoping to invest in a new sofa, and she wrote that they're considering leather because they have a cat that likes to claw at woven upholstery fabrics. Okay, so I am going to talk about the living area, but before that, I do want to talk a little bit about my overall thoughts on the space, as well as a few notes on the kitchen and dining areas. Also, a lot of you commented on past design review videos that you'd love to see my ideas visualized. So depending on how much time I have this week, I might try to do some like really rough Photoshop work to better communicate what I'm saying, but I'm not sure I'll be able to do that. I'll probably cut this out if I don't do it and leave this in if I do it. So let's see. So in general, I think that nearly every change we make in this space should have the goal in mind of better defining these 3 zones, the kitchen, the dining, and the living area, because I feel like they each just need a stronger presence. Right now, I feel like things are getting a little bit lost and it's feeling a little bit hectic, which happens a lot in open concept spaces. So starting off with the kitchen, first of all, they have these really great oak wood floors running throughout the house, and I really love their walnut kitchen cabinetry. I think the contrast between those two things is doing a really good job of sort of like defining this kitchen corner. Also, this light fixture over the island has such a massive like central presence. I think it's really successfully dividing up the space and really just making the kitchen area feel like the most dominant zone within this open concept. And I want to put a pin in that thought because I'm going to talk more about it later. So the thing about kitchens is that they collect mess, right? They just do, especially when you live in a house with kids and a lot of life in it. It's kind of inevitable that there's going to be visual clutter in the kitchen, and we love it, right? That's what makes a house feel like lived in and feel nice. There's photos on the fridge and there's stuff on the kitchen island. Most people's kitchens feel this way, and I don't think there's much sense in pretending like it won't feel this way. But that being said, I do think it's nice to design kitchens that can sort of take a back seat and not add to the visual chaos that will inevitably be there, if you know what I mean. So with that in mind, I think one of the most impactful things that you could do here is swap out your counter stools for a stool that's just a bit more quiet and subdued. Something with a cleaner silhouette and also probably a darker color so that it doesn't contrast so much with that walnut island. I would probably look for something that doesn't have a back, or if it does, then a very low back. Something that's not going to come up above the height of the kitchen island, because the way these backrests are sort of obstructing that line, that horizontal edge of the island, I think is kind of doing a disservice to highlighting that island and letting it further define the kitchen. Also, because these counter stools are sharing a space with a dining table, I think it's nice to have seats that feel very different from your dining seats. So I would look for something that feels more like a stool and less like a dining chair. if that makes sense. Like if you look at this angle and sort of squint, all of the legs and like support bars on these chairs have such a high contrast with the kitchen island that it's almost creating like a busy pattern, if you know what I mean. And to me, it's kind of blending in with the visual clutter on the kitchen island and making it seem like it's more messy than it actually is. I don't know if that totally makes sense, but that high contrast wood tone is just very visually busy, and I think it'd be nicer if it was more toned down. Okay, and moving on to the dining room with that same sort of mentality of giving a distinct presence within the open concept, there are a few things that I would do here. First of all, the best way to define a zone in an open space is to think vertically. So either something like a rug below or a light fixture or some sort of ceiling element above. Now, I'm not suggesting that they should put a rug here, A, because not everybody loves a rug in a dining room, and B, because they're already defining the seating living area with a rug, which I think is a really good move. And I just don't love the idea in a big open space of having each zone like defined by these like platforms of rugs, if that makes sense. So I do think that we should turn to a lighting fixture to make the dining area feel a bit more defined and intimate. I think a fairly substantial pendant that has like a physical presence would do a really good job of defining this space. But what I don't love is the idea of it competing with the fixture that's already over the island. I think we definitely need to limit ourselves to one very dominant light fixture in this open space. So that being said, if you love this fixture, I would honestly try moving it to the dining room. I think the island itself is really doing its part to sort of define the kitchen, and the dining room could use some more definition. So I think it might just be a more strategic use of what we're working with to relocate that fixture over the dining table. It does look a little bit high. I don't know if it's possible to adjust the height or not, but I think it could work. And then over the island, we could get an equally cool, but just much more subdued light fixture that will provide a nice quality of light and maybe visually complement the fixture over the dining table. Now, if we don't totally love the idea of moving that light fixture, I do have another idea of how we can sort of better define this area. I think this could potentially work, but it's hard to say because I don't have the plan with clear dimensions. But I feel like we could definitely lean into this almost bay window moment, this bank of windows facing the backyard, as a nice feature that could really define the dining room. I don't know if you've ever had this thought, but it was one of the first ideas that came into my mind when I was looking at these photos. This idea of building out like a banquette booth seat under those windows, somewhere that you could even like lay down and hang out and enjoy the nice sunlight that comes in those windows. I think it could be very cool. And then you would actually turn the dining table 90 degrees so that it's running along that sort of booth seat. It seems to me like there's enough room for that, but I'm not totally sure just because of the angles that I have to work with. I assume that when this house was originally built, the kitchen was walled in, and that's why there's this sort of short wall that's capping the end of the kitchen there, which is really nice, by the way. I don't usually love when you can see the edge of a kitchen cabinet. So it's really great that you have that, and it's directly across from this corner window, and the window sills are super low, like around seating height, it looks like. So I feel like this space is kind of begging for like a very deep booth seat to be built there, like from wall to wall, spanning across all the windows. I also feel like it would just feel more balanced and make more sense to have a seating element there rather than this sort of buffet table that's currently there, just because that's a very similar height and kind of a similar function to what's happening in the kitchen. And I feel like it would just kind of make more sense, like the dining room is doing its own thing, if it had seating along that wall rather than like some sort of counter height storage piece. You could also totally do this banquette booth move that I'm talking about and bring over the lighting fixture from the kitchen island. It's not like you have to choose either or. You could definitely do both, and I feel like that would make the dining area feel really nice. And I do have a few more thoughts about the dining area before we move on to talk about the living area. Regardless of whether you move the light fixture or move the dining table to feel more integrated with the bank of windows. I would definitely consider getting a new dining table with a few different qualities than the one you currently have. First, the material. I would get a material that's either not wood or a wood tone that contrasts more with the floors. Maybe a value somewhere between the walnut kitchen and the oak flooring could be really nice. I also would maybe get an oval table or a rectangular table with rounded edges. Just something that doesn't feel so boxy and rectangular, because it's kind of competing with the kitchen island, and I feel like we really want to let the kitchen island shine as this like cubic shape in the middle of the space. So I think a dining table that just feels a bit more like soft and organic would better complement that. And third, this one isn't totally necessary, but I would potentially consider getting like a pedestal table rather than a table with 4 legs, just because with the counter stools and all of the dining chairs, there's kind of a forest of legs going on that I feel like would be nice to tone down a bit. And specifically, these Eames chairs and Trip Trap chairs have pretty complex and involved legs that I feel like are feeling very busy. So it could be nice just to reduce a few of the legs that are going on here. Okay, and the last note before we move on toward the living room, I really strongly recommend getting some window treatments for these windows. The windows in your space feel pretty naked to me. Not the one in the kitchen, that one feels okay, I guess because of the fan above it, which I really love, by the way. I love having like a little moment above a door or a window. But for the bank of windows in the dining room, I would really recommend getting some window treatments there. I would probably go for Roman blinds. You could get some exterior mounted ones, so when they're open, they're not actually blocking any of the view or any of the light coming in. I just think these windows are so nice, and dressing them with some window treatments will really highlight them in a nice way. I also think this could be a nice place to bring in some color or pattern. I've mentioned this in past videos, but I think it's really nice to use color and pattern in an intentional way to really highlight special moments in a space. And I definitely think this is a great place for that. You could maybe do like a little stripe or a plaid. It doesn't have to be like a super loud pattern, but something that's not just a solid color there, I think would go a really long way. And speaking of using color intentionally, that brings me to this long wall that spans between the dining and the living room. This was actually the first thing I noticed when I looked through these photos before I even read what she wrote about her space, actually. And I think the suggestions that I'm about to mention are probably the most important and will have the biggest impact on the feeling of this open living space. So thinking about using color and contrast intentionally to sort of enhance a space, I would really recommend painting this exterior door the same color as your walls. That's mainly because doors carry like a lot of energy, right? They sort of like imply this axis of circulation in front of them, and they encourage movement through a space. And given that this door opens up right into the center of your dining space, it's honestly just not so ideal, and I feel like we don't want to highlight it. We more want it to go away. And this isn't true for all doors. Like your front door, for example, it makes a lot of sense to highlight it because it's the main entrance into the space and it has this really clear circulation path in front of it. But this door in the dining room, I think we sort of want to hide. Also, if you do bring a light fixture into your dining space, having just like an essentially white wall behind it will be a much nicer backdrop than having this like very saturated door right in the middle. And honestly, taking it even a step further, this is kind of picky and really not necessary, but I might even look into getting different door hardware, something that's not black and doesn't have such a harsh contrast. Basically, I don't want this wall to have any focal points. I don't want our eyes to be drawn to this wall. Along with that, I wouldn't hang anything between these built-ins and that exterior door. I just think it's really important to have some negative space where your eye can rest in between the different zones that we're trying to define. Basically, the ultimate goal here is to make the dining space feel like it's defined primarily by that back bank of windows and nothing else. So just quieting down this whole section in between the built-ins and those windows is going to be really important. And with that, I think the edge of these built-ins here is a super important edge to highlight in this space. This is what's going to create the sort of implied edge of your living area and create a clear definition between your zones. Right now, I feel like this whole wall and this whole sort of built-in moment is feeling pretty hectic, at least to me. I think it's just because there's a lot going on and we need to clean it up a little bit. I want the built-in feature wall to feel a lot more unified. She wrote to me that she gave a lot of thought in picking out this pinkish beige color because she felt like it complements the stone of the fireplace, but she is open to changing it. And I really like this color. I think it looks really great with the floors and the wall color, and it's working pretty well. But I am just wishing it had more contrast with the walls, because I want these to feel like two very separate things. So I think I would go for something that's still neutral, but just a little bit darker. I also personally feel like this color might be just a little bit too pink. To me, it's making the stone of the fireplace look pretty greenish. So I would pick a paint color that's probably a bit more earthy and just a bit more dark. Also, for more continuity, I might include the wall space above the fireplace behind this piece of art as part of the built-in, meaning to kind of clad the back of it in some material other than drywall, maybe like beadboard or some board and batten detail, something that complements the sort of shaker style language of these built-ins and of the kitchen cabinetry. And make sure you have a top molding piece that's similar to the one above the shelving on either side. That'll make the whole thing feel very unified and like it's really sort of one feature. I also would mount that piece of art, and I would try to limit all of the sort of smaller decor pieces and tchotchke into the shelves on either side of the fireplace. I think it's nice to group those things together and keep the mantle relatively open. Also, this is pretty picky and maybe just a me thing, but I really like when things are aligned, and it looks to me like you can probably adjust the height of those shelves on the left. And if you can, I would really encourage you to align as many of them as you can. It looks to me like those top two shelves could definitely be aligned, as well as those bottom shelves if you're just a little bit more strategic with your styling. And on a similar note, the TV looks like it's mounted pretty high to me. I'm assuming that this is a comfortable height for you guys to watch TV. So I would actually consider adding a shelf beneath the TV, one that's aligned with that bottom shelf on the left side of the fireplace, which again will just make this whole element feel a lot more cohesive, and it will also kind of break up that pretty big gap that's under the TV right now that I don't think looks very nice. Okay, so now moving on to the living room furniture. I understand the reason they probably have two sofas like this is one, to have a nice social circle when they have guests over, and two, to have that option of laying down while they watch TV, which is just at the end of this lighter colored sofa. But I think what this space plan is really lacking is hierarchy. When you have two sofas like this, even when they have such a strong contrast, like one is light and one is dark, even with that, it just kind of hurts the vibe of the room when they're such a similar size, because it's not clear which of these should be anchoring the space. So I think there's sort of two options here given the location of the TV. You could definitely get an L-shaped sectional that feels more unified, and like that is the one primary piece of furniture in the space. Or you could choose two pieces of furniture that serve these functions but feel more intentional and like there's a clearer hierarchy between them. I'm personally not the hugest fan of sectionals. I think I've mentioned that in past videos, but I just don't love the way they make a space feel. They're very like closed off and confining. I just prefer them in like a den or a basement or someplace that's meant to feel more closed off and not in like an open concept living space like this. But there are some nice looking sectionals out there, and I could see it being a reasonable choice here. I know that you were considering a leather sofa in order to prevent the cat from clawing at it, but because you have this green leather sofa here, I would really encourage you to get a different upholstery fabric that feels a lot softer and kind of contrasts that leather material. I think a leather sofa would feel like pretty intense. You can see here this leather sofa with the leather chair, I personally feel like is a lot of leather. I would love to see some layering of like other upholstery fabrics. I believe there are upholstery fabrics that cats are less likely to scratch at. So I would look for a performance fabric that has like a very tight weave. Now, if you don't go with a sectional here, I do think it's important to establish some hierarchy between these pieces, like I said. So I would actually consider replacing where this lighter colored sofa is under the window with more of a daybed type piece, maybe something with longer legs that will feel a bit lighter than the sofa will, and maybe even something that has no back or a very low back. This way it can serve as seating when you have a big group, and it can also be really comfortable to lay down on and watch TV. And this will also sort of open up the space to the window and to the view out the window, which is nice. Also, speaking of the window, I would really encourage you to get some window treatments here as well. Probably just curtains. I don't think it needs to be anything special. But again, I think that will sort of highlight and enhance the window. And along with that, I have a few thoughts about the rug. First of all, because the sofa that will go where the leather sofa currently is like the dominant piece in the space, it's really important that we'll turn the rug 90 degrees so that it's running parallel to that sofa. The long edge of your rug should always run under the longest piece of furniture in the space. It'll just feel a lot more balanced that way. So your rug will actually extend past the fireplace, and with that it will relate a lot better to the built-in feature that we're sort of using to highlight the living area zone. And that will also allow the green armchair to sort of scoot back and give a bit more breathing room to the sofa. And if we make the changes I mentioned to the counter stools and the dining area, that will definitely create some more like visual real estate that will allow for this. Also, whenever I have a chair kind of floating in a space plan like this, I think it's really nice to incorporate it into like a little vignette with a floor lamp or a small table or both, just something so that it doesn't feel totally alone. And we're not only going to rotate the rug, we're also going to rotate the coffee table with it, because the same rule applies. If you have a rectangular coffee table, it should run parallel to your dominant piece of furniture in your living room. I also definitely think that this rug should be changed out for a different rug. I can tell that somebody in the home really loves this teal color, which is totally great to bring into the space. I just don't think that this rug is the place to do that. Again, working around the green leather chair, the colors just aren't working together. I think that the rug is way too saturated and the hues are like very similar, but also very different, if that makes sense. So I think that they just don't look good together. Also, this rug is going to do a lot of work in defining the living area. And right now it's a really similar value to your floors. It's obviously a very different color, but you can see that the value, like the darkness, is almost the same. It might be easier if I show you in black and white. I'll do that when I'm editing. But you can see that in grayscale, the rug and the oak floors are almost the same color gray. So I really only think it's nice for a rug and flooring to have the same value if you're almost color matching them and you're just playing with texture rather than color. But if you're working with two different colors and they're entirely different hues, I think that they should also have different values, if that makes sense. Like you can see this is happening with the red rug in the entryway back there. It has a much darker value, so it works a lot better with these floors. So I would go for a living room rug that's either much lighter or much darker than your floors, probably because of the dark kitchen cabinets and again this green leather chair. I would go for a lighter colored rug, and then most of the furniture that you bring in can be mid-tone to darker colored and have some contrast with the rug. I think that would look really nice and define the space really well. I also noticed this entry bench is pushed up right against the back of the sofa, and rather than having two seating elements back to back like this, I would play with relocating some sort of entryway seating along that back wall that's currently empty, and maybe having a console table behind the sofa instead with some larger decor pieces that can just sort of bring some height behind the sofa, make it feel a bit more comfortable. In general, with the changes we're making, rotating the rug and having a smaller daybed under the window, that main sofa is probably going to be a lot closer to the TV now which means you'll have more space in your entryway to kind of play with the layout. And along with moving the seating to that back wall, it might be nice to relocate the entry table along with some artwork there as well, rather than having it squished up against the big plant there. Mainly just because I really like that plant. I think it's doing a really nice job of separating the front entry from the living area. And I just think it would shine a lot better if there wasn't so much going on behind it. And at the same time, I feel like this back wall is just sort of asking for an entryway moment. Okay, and finally, I just want to talk really quickly about lighting. I feel like I'm talking a lot. There are a really good amount of recessed can lights in this space. I suspect that it's probably because when this home was originally built, and this wasn't an open concept level, they put can lights in the 4 corners of each room. So I assume that these 4 lights in the dining area are on one light switch, the same as these 4 corners of the living room and the 3 can lights in the kitchen. So in the future, if you are considering editing your lighting plan even more, I would honestly get rid of a good amount of these cans, because as they are now, they just feel very oddly placed, and I think they're located in spots that you don't necessarily need down lighting. In the dining room, I would probably just have one central pendant that gives off a good amount of light, and I would maybe leave the 2 recessed lights that are sort of flanking that back bay of windows, but I think I would get rid of the other 2. And in the living room, I would try to make these lights make more sense with the built-in, maybe opting for some fixtures that look like this, that feel like they're sort of highlighting the built-in feature. I would leave one centered as it is over that sort of TV elevation, and I would relocate this other one to be centered over the fireplace. Similarly, I would think really intentionally about lighting that back wall near the entryway. And of course, I wouldn't hesitate to bring in lots and lots of lamps into this space. That's always the final touch that makes it feel like so cozy and so nice. Okay, and that's all I have for you now. I feel like that was kind of a lot of talking, but we'll see how long this video is. But in general, I can really see this space coming together really, really nicely. Okay, thanks for watching. Also, a friendly reminder that this is an ongoing series. I'm planning on doing roughly 1 advice video per month moving forward. So if you want to submit your space, you can send me photos at noahdanielstudio@gmail.com. Be sure to send horizontal photos as well as a lot of different angles of your space so that I can understand all of the details. And if you don't just want to wait around to see if I talk about your space and it feels like a bit more urgent and you want answers about your design dilemmas, I do offer design consultations over video. So you can email me for more details about that. A little bit of shameless self-promotion there. But yeah, that's all I have for this week. I'll see you soon. Love ya. Bye.